Hello and welcome to the video instructions for the second field project. So the basics of this are really simple. You're going to do the same thing you did in the last field project, plus some evaluation. And the evaluation includes identifying the argument as deductive or inductive, asking the general critical questions you ask of any argument, and then summarizing the results using the appropriate terminology. So the previous steps all apply. For step one, you find a suitable example. Step two, explain the context. Step three, write the argument in standard form. All of that is exactly as it was last time. After that, identify the argument as deductive or inductive. Answer the critical questions. And remember, those critical questions are the premises true, or at least plausible? Would the premises support the conclusion if they were true to the needed extent, given the context? And has any relevant information been left out of the premises? And then finally, you want to summarize the results using the appropriate terminology. Okay, so just a word about the part of the field project that is the same as before and some common mistakes. So one thing that you just have to get right, is understand what standard form looks like. Go back to class 2 and be sure that you're doing things properly. You're not just rewriting the passage in some other language, some other phrasing. Another thing that happens sometimes is around step 2. Don't confuse the story that the reporter is telling with the argument that is being given by someone in that story. So let me give you an example. This isn't something that someone turned in, but this is the kind of thing that I sometimes see. So this is from the Washington Post yesterday, I think. Tucker Carlson faces backlash over Putin interview after Navalny death. So, Tucker Carlson gave a very flattering interview to Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. And among other things, he said, look, of course Putin assassinates his enemies. All leaders assassinate. All leaders kill people. And then shortly after that, Russian dissident Alexei Navalny died under mysterious circumstances, probably poisoned. So people then accused Carlson of providing pro-Russia propaganda. So that's the story. Now, you might wind up writing it up like this. So this is the submission form previously, right? First you identify the source, and then for step 2, you're supposed to identify the context. Look at so who's speaking, what context are they speaking in, who is the audience, and the fourth point, is the author giving their own argument, or are they describing an argument given by another? And if you, with the example I just gave, you might mess that up. So here's an incorrect answer. You might say, Adela Sullivan and Maria Luisa Paul are writing for a newspaper for the general public. So those are the two reporters who wrote this story. See, they're, you can't read the headline, but their names are right there, right? And then, so if you do it like that, then you might say, you might just repeat the story that they wrote, which is really a narrative. It's not even an argument. So, but you would rewrite it as if it were an argument. Tucker Carlson gave a flattering interview to Vladimir Putin. Carlson said, leaders kill people. People are criticizing Carlson for producing Russian propaganda. Notice that this is not an argument. The premises do not provide evidence for the conclusion. This is just a story. It's a sequence of events. Tucker Carlson did something, and then people responded. There is, however, an argument, actually several arguments in this story, but they're not being given by the reporters who are just describing the sequence of events. So here's a different way you could do it. So you could say Meghan McCain, who is one of the people who criticized Tucker Carlson, is speaking to the general public. And again, criticizing Tucker Carlson. So you could say, look, her premises. P1, Carlson made a video defending Putin's use of assassination. P2, Putin just had one of his enemies, someone the US supports, assassinated. Conclusion, Carlson is hurting American interests. Right? So you have to fill in the conclusion there a little bit to get to really what she's saying about Carlson. That he is not a patriotic American, he's not helping our country, that sort of thing. So, yeah, rather than talking about the people who are writing the story, look at the people in the story being described by the reporters and what arguments they give. Okay, so that was just some advice about how to do the first 3 steps, which are the same as before. I want to avoid mistakes that people made the last time around. So now I want to talk about the 3 new steps. Step 4 was identify the argument as deductive or inductive, answer the critical questions, which are the premises true or at least plausible? Would the premises support the conclusion if they were true, given the context, supported enough? And has any relevant information been omitted from the premises? And then the final step is to summarize using the appropriate terminology. So let's just look at step 4 first. Step 4 asks you to identify the argument as deductive or inductive. And so some of what you need to do is to think about context here. One of the things I've said is that deductive arguments are only possible in certain kinds of domains. And my go-to example has been mathematics. So one question to ask yourself, is this a domain like mathematics, where valid arguments are possible and expected? In which case you're dealing with a deductive situation. Other situations might be something that you try and shoehorn into the structure of a mathematical-like structure. Our taller than examples have fit that pattern. You also are going to need to think about the structure of the argument itself. Does the argument work like the all people are mortal argument? Again, if it's like that, it's deductive. But here's a hint. Most of the time, the real-world arguments that you find, like in newspapers or in everyday experience, are not deductive, they're inductive. So go back and look at the readings and videos for classes 3 and 9 for details on deduction and induction. So next you want to ask and answer the critical questions. Are the premises true, or at least plausible? So for this, don't spend more than 5 minutes of Googling if you want to verify something that occurs in one of the arguments you're looking at. And if you're still not sure after a basic Google search, then just say where you would look for the information. Would the premises support the conclusion if they were true? And support it enough given the context? Here, how you classify the argument in step 4 is important. You want to think about what kind of standard of proof you're living up to. If it's an inductive argument, and it probably is, you're going to want to think about something like the reasonable doubt standard of proof or the preponderance of evidence standard of proof. Has any relevant information been omitted from the premises? If you do think there is significant missing information, this should be reflected in your answer to question 2 as well, because if important information is missing, that's going to reduce the strength of the inference in the argument. So the last step is to summarize the argument using the appropriate terms. And so the terms that we use in critical thinking, the standard issue terms are valid, sound, strong, and cogent. If the argument is deductive, you can talk about it as being valid or sound. If it's inductive, you want to talk about it as being strong or cogent. So the way to think about that is to use this decision tree, right? You start out with question 4, is the argument deductive or inductive? It's probably inductive, so you're going to be off on the right-hand side here. Are the premises true? If they're true, you go off on the left. Actually, either way, you want to ask, would the premises make the conclusion likely if they were true? If the premises are true and the truth of the premises make the conclusion likely, the argument is cogent. If they don't make the argument likely, the argument is weak, but it has true premises. If the premises are false, but they would have made the conclusion likely if they were true, you would say that the argument is strong but not cogent. And then finally, if the inference is weak and the premises are false, that's the worst you can be, so it's weak with false premises. Things are parallel over on the deductive side. If you have a good inference and true premises, the argument is said to be sound. If you have a good inference but false premises, the argument is valid but not sound. If the inference is invalid, then it's either going to be one of the two that say invalid with true premises or the one that says invalid with false premises. So that looks like a lot, but I want to emphasize this set of terminology because people tend to get it wrong throughout the class, and I really want to emphasize all the different aspects, all the different things that go into evaluating an argument. Okay, so those are the instructions for the field project.